Is magic coming back to Fionna World? I think it is. I think Fionna and Cake's world will once again become magical. And there are a few reasons that I think this. First of all, Fionna World has been canonized. When the universe was first created, it had magic, but only because it was connected to Ice King and the Crown. Without Ice King's magic, Fionna World became normalized and lost its magic. But the reason Fionna World needed the Crown to have magic is because it wasn't connected to the multiverse. And now that Fionna World has been canonized and is connected to the multiverse, it could have magic for real. Instead of needing the Crown, Fionna World can now naturally have magic. And it could develop magic in the future. And we know that Fionna World has already changed somehow, because it was previously just one city block, and we saw that it expanded after being made canon. And it used to be that there were all these glitches everywhere, but they disappeared when the universe was made canon. This is likely because the universe has reset in some way when joining the multiverse. And this reset could include magic coming back and the universe reverting back to its original state. Now, remember how, in episode 9, Fionna had this crazy dream? She dreamt that magic did come back to her world, but it merged with the normal world. It was like the normal human world had been overtaken with magic. I think that Fionna's dream might actually come true, or at least partially, because I don't think LSP will actually turn into spaghetti. This dream Fionna had could be a vision of the future. A future where, because their universe has been canonized, magic comes back and starts creeping in and turning people back into their magical selves. And the thing is, we already know that there is something going on with Fionna's dreams. In the very first episode, Fionna has a weird dream that seems to mostly be influenced by suppressed memories of the past magical world. However, Fionna also dreams of the Winter King, who she has not met yet at this point, and the Winter King was certainly never in her universe in the past when it used to be magical. Even though the Winter King in Fionna's dream looks a bit different to the actual Winter King, we know it is definitely him because Fionna herself says so.
This is going to sound nuts, but I think I've been dreaming about you.
Since Fionna's dream with the Winter King turned out to be a dream that foretold the future, that makes it more likely that her dream where magic came back could come true, especially since, in her dream where magic came back, the world did not turn back to how it was. Instead, it was like the current world got infected with magic, and was slowly turning back. And there is something significant that happened in the Fionna and Cake show that makes me think that magic has already started coming back into Fionna World. But first, some context. You might assume that all the Fionna and Cake characters, back when they were magical, were just gender-bent versions of the normal Adventure Time characters. However, this is not the case. For whatever reason, Prismo decided to switch it up and make some very significant changes. The first is obviously that Cake is a cat and not a dog, but the biggest change is Ice Queen. You might think that Ice Queen is just a gender-bent Simon, but that is not true. Ice Queen's backstory is completely different to Ice King's backstory. This is revealed in the Fionna and Cake comic issue 3. In this comic, Ice Queen's backstory starts on page 103. Ice Queen's backstory is that she was a water nymph and she saved a cat who she then befriended. But later the water nymph got fatally injured, saving the cat a second time. The cat then found a treasure, which was an ice gem, and it is heavily implied that this gem saved the water nymph's life but also turned her crazy and turned her into Ice Queen. Also, the cat that saved Ice Queen is pretty much confirmed to have been Cake. Natasha Allegri is the creator of the Fionna and Cake characters, and she wrote and illustrated this comic, including Ice Queen's backstory. And on her Tumblr, she posted this drawing where Ice Queen is injured and Cake is giving her a red gem that looks just like one of the gems in her crown. Of course, this cat that saved Ice Queen in the comic doesn't look like Cake at all. But in the comic, the ice gem is blue, but in the show, the gems in Ice Queen's crown are red. The design inaccuracies of Cake looking different and the gem being blue must be an artistic choice. And this choice could represent how Ice Queen has lost her memories, so she cannot remember her past accurately. Now, there are plenty of Adventure Time comics that are explicitly non-canon or not confirmed to be canon. However, unlike some of the other Fionna and Cake comics, the creator of the Fionna and Cake characters wrote this comic. Now, at the end of this specific comic, it is revealed that Gunter is the narrator, but since Natasha also posted this on her blog, it seems that Gunter being the narrator doesn't change whether or not this comic is canon. Anyway, while it is not explicitly confirmed if Ice Queen's backstory is canon to the Fionna and Cake show, the state of Ice Queen in the show seems to indicate that her comic backstory is indeed canon. If we look at the human Ice Queen in the show, she doesn't seem to really be a female Simon. Her job is selling ice cream, and she is even wearing a fake little crown. If she were a female Simon, surely she would be working as an antiquarian, like Simon was, and not an ice cream lady. But the biggest thing is her eyebrows. Ice Queen, even in her human form, still has her lightning eyebrows. This suggests that her eyebrows are naturally lightning shaped, and even though her crown exaggerated them, the fact that they are lightning shaped is not because of her world's version of the crown, meaning she is not a female version of Simon, and that her backstory is likely that she was a water nymph, like in the comics. But why am I telling you about Ice Queen's backstory? Well, my point is that Ice Queen's backstory being significantly different could mean that other characters are significantly different too, or at least they were when their world was magical. There is a book called Adventure Time: How to Warrior by Fionna and Cake, and while it is not confirmed to be canon in the show, in it we see that Marshall Lee was a vampire even when he was a baby, as in this picture he is a baby, but he is burning in the sun. Of course, Marceline was not born a vampire, she became one later in life, and her father, Hunson Abadeer, was not a vampire. But Marshall Lee being shown to be a vampire as a baby in this book could indicate that Hana Abadeer was a vampire in the Fionna and Cake universe, and because of this, Marshall Lee was born a vampire. We do know that Hana Abadeer was definitely a demon in the Fionna and Cake world, as it was also shown in this book, and in the TV show, she has a necklace referencing her or Hunson's demon form. But there is no reason she couldn't be a demon and a vampire. Perhaps she was a demon that became a vampire at some point in her life. Since Ice Queen's backstory is so different to Ice King's, why can't Marshall Lee and his mother's backstories also be different? Especially since, if Ice Queen's backstory is so different, that would mean that Marshall Lee didn't get raised by a female version of Simon, which means Prismo would have had to drastically change Marshall Lee's backstory, so he likely never became a vampire hunter like Marceline, which means Prismo would have had to come up with a different reason that Marshall Lee became a vampire. And this reason could simply be that he was born a vampire because his mother was one. Now, the idea that Hana Abadeer was a vampire and that Marshall Lee was born a vampire sounds a little crazy. and maybe it would make more sense to assume Marshall Lee being a vampire as a baby in this book was a mistake. But in the new Fionna and Cake series, there is evidence that Marshall Lee's mother, Hana Abadeer, was in fact a vampire in the magical world. Hana Abadeer literally hosts the blood drive charity event in the episode The Star, and this was obviously a vampire reference. There is even a poster with a bat thing on it and a painting of a vampire, and then a poster of a vampire being displayed. If Marshall Lee held an event that seemed vampire themed, that would make sense because he and Marceline are vampires. But this blood drive event was all about Hana Abadeer. It was her event that she organized and hosted. This doesn't really make sense unless she herself is a vampire, or was. Which again, that book implied by having Marshall Lee be a vampire when he was a baby. And at the end of Fionna and Cake, after their universe had been canonized and made part of the multiverse, we see a montage of lots of different characters, and one part of the montage focuses on Hana Abadeer. Now, her house is still red, and we see she is drinking red wine, but she is also drinking red wine in her portrait. The fact she is drinking it, even in the family portrait, seems to be a vampire reference to drinking blood. But there is something else that is evidence of her being a vampire, and also evidence of magic coming back to Fionna World. When Hana Abadeer walks past this mirror, she has no reflection, and the fact that the shot zooms in on her walking past the mirror makes this seem even more intentional. Of course, we all know that vampires have no reflections, so it could be that Hana Abadeer was a vampire in the magical world, and now magic is coming back into Fionna World, and it is changing everyone back into their magical selves, like in Fionna's dream. Anyway, in conclusion, I think that because the universe was made canon and is now part of the multiverse, magic is coming back to Fionna World, and all the characters will start turning back into their magical selves. I think this because it happened in Fionna's dream, and we know that her dreams can reveal the future because she dreamed about the Winter King before she met him. And I think that Hana Abadeer was a vampire in the magical world because of this book where Marshall Lee is shown to be a vampire as a baby, and because Hana Abadeer is heavily vampire coded in Fionna and Cake, mainly with the whole blood drive thing. And the fact she has no reflection in this scene not only supports her being a vampire, but is evidence that magic is coming back into the universe and turning all the characters back into their magical selves. And feel free to like and subscribe.